Hey everyone, down with Bowne, Professor Walter Bowne here. Saturday morning with better time to talk about George Wilson from The Great Gatsby. So I've lectured on this, but I'm going to be reading from a work um, about George Wilson and really about the entire Great Gatsby. It's the 100-year anniversary, so I have a collection of essays about the novel that I've taught for probably 22 years. Um, and so it's an unsung tragic hero of the Great Gatsby, where I'm examining George Wilson and the American dream, the decay of the American dream. Right. Anyway, in The Great Gatsby, George B. Wilson serves as a tragic counterpoint. He embodies the moral and physical erosion of the American dream and the suffering of the working class in 1920s America. F. Scott Fitzgerald's novel has a handful of colossal characters, yet the seemingly minor figure of George Wilson deserves closer examination. Despite his limited stage time, he stands as a crucial contrast to the wealth, illustrating themes of empathy. Oh, empathy, where did that go? And the struggles of the working class. Oh boy. While Wilson contrasts starkly with the privileged and dominant Tom Buchanan, like one of those oligarchs, he'll also face, like Gatsby, sexual jealousy against Tom's, quote, hard malice. But Wilson is unaware of his genuine opponent. For many, then, this highlights the harsh reality. Ironically named after two presidents, George Washington and Woodrow Wilson, you get it? George Wilson embodies a failed American experiment. The vision of the past, all men are created equal, vanishes in the horror of the present, World War I. The father of our country and the schoolmaster in politics have now been reborn as this dying man in living ash. Notice the paradox there. How can ash live? Right? The novel's more glamorous elements, after all, often overshadow Fitzgerald's sharp commentary on the 1920s. That's why I do not like the movies. I do not watch the movies. Um, because I think they glamorize it, and that's not the point. It's a satire, and I think this is a misreading. Okay, the working class in conflict. This parallel extends even to Jay Gatsby, who, despite his illegal wealth, is ultimately a poor character. So the poor kills the poor, you get it, and the rich just are rich. James Gatz, a clam digger from Minnesota, dies at the hands of Wilson. But still, Fitzgerald presents the Wilsons as mere symbols rather than, quote, rounded characters. Ian Forster talked about rounded characters, flat characters. And these are rather flat characters, but they serve a purpose. But this still raises the question of whether, in times of conflict, the working class often bears the brunt of violence. Consider Wilson's appearance in Chapter 2. The interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was the dust-covered wreck of a Ford, which crouched in a dim corner. It had occurred to me that this shadow of a garage must be a blind, and that sumptuous and romantic apartments were concealed overhead when the proprietor himself appeared in the door of an office, wiping his hands on a piece of waste. He was a blond, spiritless man, anemic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a damp gleam of hope sprang into his light blue eyes. Wow. Damp gleam, water. How does damp spring? Mixed metaphor, but it works. Wilson's tragic arc unfolds in the Valley of Ashes, a setting that mirrors T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, published just a year before Fitzgerald began writing the great American novel. Wilson struggles in his dilapidated garage, grasping for the elusive American dream, but must beg the wealthy Tom Buchanan for help. He's portrayed as ghost-like, barely noticed by the others, betrayed by his wife Myrtle, who has an affair with Tom Buchanan. Let's go back to that quote. All right, it's crouching in a dim corner. Right, it's like he's like scared, like crouching in a trench. And a blind means it's like something that's false. Right, this garage is not really a garage. It's just like a prop, like in Hollywood. And he's like wiping his hands on a piece of waste. He's the piece of waste, right, in this society, right? Which is so, so sad. And this is still happening in 2025, people, right? The Tom Buchanans are out there, and there's so many of us, like George Wilson, just trying to make it, but we're getting used. Anyway, no politics. Everything's politics. All right, so let's get back to Myrtle. Myrtle smiles slowly and walking through her husband if she were a ghost, as if he were a ghost, right? It's foreshadowing, right? In my manuscript edition of The Great Gatsby, I have one of 1,800 printed copies from Paris, France, right? It's one of my most treasured possessions as far as a book. Fitzgerald's careful revisions, such as omitting unnecessary descriptions, show his meticulous craftsmanship in shaping Wilson's character. On paper, Fitzgerald writes in his majestic hand, and he puts in capital letters, repairs, George B. Wilson, cars bought and sold. Fitzgerald admits the sign outside was lettered. Why? Well, it's obvious, right? He chose to omit extraneous details to guide the reader's focus more effectively. I always say, like, omit needless words or cut the fat, just cut the fat, cut the fat. And he also deletes the obvious, we turned into its dim interior with an automobile, gloomy door, right? Again, just take us to the action, and there's no need to keep on with the gloom. It's already over, right? Fitzgerald adds the understated adjective unprosperous. We had seen much that was prosperous in chapters, like 1. But now it's like saying I was not on time instead of saying I was late. Deteriorated, dilapidated, okay, all poor. But why not have the word prosperous in there too? It's a classic take on the classic use of understatement. So why do the poor always believe it will be the rich who save them? Is it saving or more using? Here's an image from Fitzgerald's manuscript, which is fantastic. I've spent hours and hours and hours on this. Invisibly pivotal, a carefully constructed weakness. In the original handwritten manuscript, Fitzgerald works his craft to present George Wilson, and he uses a line about him looking custodial, as if he just got some poor girl with child. That's a line he'll use later in chapter 7 towards the end, not here in chapter 2. We can see he is no husband or lover, at least what we can expect. Hello, Wilson, old man, said Tom, slapping him jovially on the shoulder. How's business? How's business? I can't complain, answered Wilson unconvincingly. Really? He can't complain. When are you going to sell me that car? Next week. I got my man working on it. Works pretty slow, doesn't he? No, he doesn't, said Tom coldly. And if you feel that way, maybe I'd better sell it somewhere else after all. I didn't mean that, explained Wilson quickly. I just mean, he's like Mr. Cellophane, too, right? From, what's that musical? It, don't get to be 55 because it just, Chicago. It's from Chicago. See, I got it. In the same scene, Fitzgerald also reworks the symbolism of Wilson and ash and dust that foreshadows his end. Sorry, spoiler alert, in chapter 8. Fitzgerald takes away leaden yellow hair and changes it to pale hair. Perhaps he knew yellow was already an image for Gatsby, like his ties and his car, right? Again, Fitzgerald is crafting and creating. His creations change. Wilson's character, marked by passivity, seems unlikely to assert himself at this stage in the novel. So why is Fitzgerald's revision remove the earlier dialogue in chapter 2? Right, so Fitzgerald cuts, why don't you come into the office? He suggested, blinking. It's much more. Instead, it's Myrtle now commanding, with the added benefit of her lover's appearance, Tom Buchanan. Get some chairs, why don't you? So somebody can sit down. God, grief, and the failure of religion. The novel's treatment of religion, or that thereof, is particularly poignant in Wilson's story. Right? It's the poor will always be with us, so it makes sense that Christianity would arise from the ashes of Wilson and the Valley of Ash. When Michaelis, a minor character, suggests that Wilson should have a church to turn to his grief, it highlights one of the few mentions of religion in the book. Instead, the eyes of T.J. Eichelberg loom over the Valley of Ashes, a faded memory of a God in a world where World War One destroyed faith in God, king, and country. As an interesting aside or digression, the original name for Michaelis was Maro Michaelis, right? We can see this in the original script. It was changed after the first printing of the book. Michaelis is also a Latinized patronymic for Michael, meaning gift from God. I mean, this is what we do mean by a close reading, right? It's like, hey, why is this character? Why was this character named this? Which is curious in the scene because Mavro Michaelis is a Greek surname and it translates to Black Michael. Well, do we want a Black Michael? We're not talking about ethnic here, right? We're talking like someone who's like, unfortunately, our language is charged with lots of racism, but meaning like someone who's bad, right? In fact, in the manuscript, Fitzgerald had the original Michaelis, but then in a different, heavier pencil adds Mavro. So we can take an educated guess that Fitzgerald reconfigured the symbolism, right? Making the restaurant owner who confronts and comforts Wilson as a good rather than bad, right? Black not meaning bad, right? Bad guys can wear white hats. We have so many wearing white hats these days who are definitely not the good guys. It's okay. Stop politics. It's funny though. Even the current version has the police officer spelling the name Mav. The policeman was saying O. No, R corrected the man. Mavro. So he keeps that in there. We can see elements of the beginning even at the end, showing the mix up and the confusion of names and cars and people and morals. Even the police officer doesn't get the facts. Fitzgerald writes, Mavro Michaelis was astonished. They had been neighbors for years, and Wilson had never been in the faculty of his mind before. Generally, he was one of those worn out men. When he wasn't working, he sat on a chair at his door and stared at people and the cars that passed along. When anyone spoke to him, he invariably laughed in an agreeable, colorless way. He was his wife's man and not his own. Oof, ouch. This is basically the same as the printed version, with the exception of never seemed capable, faintly capable of such a statement. All right, just get rid of that. Wilson's struggle for meaning is palpable. Palpable. That's a weird word. No, I just have trouble speaking English. Even in his marriage, he is not in control. He has no say whatsoever. He just wants to achieve the American dream. George Wilson. But he has to beg the wealthy Tom Buchanan for scraps, for help. And Tom's callous response, why do you need money all of a sudden? Think about how horrible this is. We hear this from politicians today, right? Well, you won't really miss your social security and blah blah blah. Oh my goodness, you people are out of touch, evil people. It underscores the vast gulf between the rich and the poor. Tom, born into wealth, he didn't do anything to get his wealth. He didn't do a single damn thing. He can't even conceive of needing money to survive. Manipulated and marginalized. I find it curious, and maybe out of Tom's character, to pick up Wilson like a doll and carry him into the office, setting him down in a chair. Does this seem empathetic of Tom, caring, or just how an adult treats a child, or a child with their toy? Just getting him out of the way, sealing him away before he can ask any more questions. In a cruel twist, Tom uses Wilson to solve his own problems. Rather than confronting Tom for the affair, Wilson is manipulated into believing Gatsby caused Myrtle's death. This manipulation leads to the novel's tragic climax. I got in trouble for using the climax one time in class. The administration thought it was sexual. Idiots, right? With the Wilson killing, I'm not actually joking about that. With Wilson killing Gatsby and then himself, completing what Fitzgerald calls the Holocaust, which with a lowercase h means total destruction. Fitzgerald's portrayal of Wilson evolves throughout the drafting process, as evidenced by manuscript changes. In early drafts, Wilson is described in even starker terms, merging with the cement colored walls of his garage, veiled in ash and dust. These changes highlight Fitzgerald's careful crafting of Wilson as a symbol of the downtrodden working class. In the end, Wilson emerges as a tragic figure, a decent moral man pounded into the ground by a society that worships wealth and power. Wilson becomes a symbolic figure, representing the powerlessness and marginalized in society that's dominated by the one percenters. His desperate act of violence, becoming an avenging angel with his gun, is a twisted form of Old Testament justice in a world that has abandoned traditional religion or never really practiced the faith accurately. In a world devoid of moral order, represented by the faded eyes of T.J. Ecclesburg, Wilson's desperate search for meaning leads him to deliver his own twisted form of justice. His act of violence, fueled by a sense of divine retribution, reflects a society where traditional values have been abandoned. Right, he's traditional. He's a married man trying to work. His wife's cheating, and he's getting like he's just can't make it. Right. What does this say about Fitzgerald's view of justice in the novel? How does it compare to the fates of the other characters? This is no justice. This is just life. Just a type of existentialist meaning, like allies finding truth in the printed word or recognizing the irony at the sad funeral with only 3 attendees. The poor bastard, ally says. They used to go there by the thousands. Justice is injustice for the poor. For the rich, like Tom and Daisy and Jordan, justice is bought, a protective shield that preserves as well as imprisons. Wilson's story serves as a damning commentary on the 1920s America and the elusive American dream. In a novel ostensibly about pursuit of the dream, Wilson's failure highlights its impossibility for those not born into privilege. While characters like Nick Carraway, born into relative wealth and educated at Yale, face no real obstacles, right? This is kind of like just like a game for him. Like, oh, this is fun. It's a little interesting summer here, 1922. Wilson's struggle and ultimate destruction underscores the harsh realities faced by the working class. We empathize with his betrayal and the collapse of his American dream. In the end, it's Wilson, the decent, basic moral mechanic who can actually do things, like being a mechanic, who gets pounded in the ground while the corrupt and privileged survive. They just careless people that go back into their money, right? George Wilson may be a minor character in terms of page time, but his significance of themes and passage is immense, though limited. His tragic story serves as a powerful indictment of a society that worships wealth and power at the expense of morality and human dignity. Wow. Does that speak to 2025? No politics, man. In many ways, Wilson is a broken soul of the novel, whose tragic arc serves as a profound critique of a society that prioritizes wealth over morality. You know what? Cut the fat, man. I just said that. Why am I saying that again? Through his character, Fitzgerald reveals the dark side of the American dream, a promise that remains out of reach for those born into poverty and powerlessness. You know what? I should go back and edit this because I'm a little redundant there. But anyway, thank you for watching, listening. I teach at East Stroudsburg University off and on. I'm retired, but I'm not retired. And I love talking about literature. Thank you, everyone. Cheers.